and then proceeded immediately by getting on a boat and headed toward Morea, which was the south pole of this grid, so that we could be there for the birth of a brand new consciousness on Earth, something that has never happened on Earth before, and synthetically in this way, and a great excitement. It went through me, it went through everyone. We were just like on fire with excitement. And so now we're going to go into another ceremony, a ceremony that we consider to be the most sacred ceremony that has ever been performed on Earth, ever. As we pulled into Tahiti, Tahiti is like, it's hard to believe that Tahiti actually exists if you've ever been there, because it's so beautiful. The mountains just stretch up to the sky. It is just an incredible place. And we had just come from Easter Island, which is dry and not much on there and everything. And so all these people were used to that. And as we pulled into the harbor, it was one of the most beautiful scenes I've seen in my life. They got so excited that everybody started clapping because of just the pure beauty of this place. And from there, we were met by members of the Queen of Morea. Not the next day, but 2 days later, we were taken to be before her. Now, of course, she wouldn't allow all 55 people or whatever it was to come there. So there was just myself and a woman named Ruth Tive, who is a Maori, a native Maori from New Zealand, who knew her language, and I felt like she was the right person to be there. So the two of us went to meet with the Queen. The Queen was a huge woman with this very big heart. She was just pure love. And she knew exactly why we were there, that we were there to birth this new consciousness onto the earth and to do the ceremony for this. And she was also there with her another woman who was her assistant directly underneath her. And she opened us with open arms and hugs, and we began to talk. And very quickly into all of this, she said to me, "Where do you want to do the ceremony?" Well, I said, without thinking too much, I said, well, I would like to do it in the center of the island. The reason I said that was because I was there in 1985, and I had to do ceremony on that same island in 1985 with the same tribe, and they took me into the center of the island, and that's where we did the ceremony. It's in the Serpent of Light book, if you want to read that. And so I said, well, how about the center of the island? And she looked at me and she says, well, I can't do that. And we said, why? And she says, well, I don't have authority. I have authority everywhere, but not in the center of the island. I'm sorry, I can't give you that permission. And the person that was her assistant jumps up, ran over to her and says, no, you don't understand. What's about to take place with this ceremony is one of the most important things on earth ever. And just give him permission and we'll deal with everybody later on this. And she said, no, I don't have that authority and I can't do it. And they started getting into a little bit of aggression, you might say. And she says, you have to. And she says, no, I am not going to break the rules. And she says, you must. And she says, no, I will not. And pretty soon they're screaming at each other. And I mean, really putting out some energy. And, I was actually backing up, moving away. And finally, the Queen broke down crying and says, no, I cannot do this. And that's when Ruth went over to her, put her arms around her, and spoke to her in her own language, and tried to calm her down. But it didn't do any good. I mean, she was a queen. She was not going to do what was not right. And she was only going to stay in the truth, and that was the truth, that she didn't have that authority, and she just wasn't going to do it. And so we left there without any permission to do this ceremony. I went back home to my hotel. I'll never forget this. I sat in there going, oh my God, 13,000 years, millions of people, untold amounts of money spent, 83,000 buildings built all over the world, and many lives were lost doing this whole project. And here we come down to the last few minutes, and two women have a fight, and it's not going to happen? I just didn't believe it. But it really did look like that's what was going to happen. It looked like it was just not going to go anywhere from there. So we sat around for a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, I don't know how long it was, just waiting for something to happen. And then, out of the middle of nowhere, we get an invitation from the king of the Polynesian people. His name was Papa Mataru. He was very old, well, he wasn't that old, but he was in his 80s. And he asked us to come and have a conference with him. Well, this was great, because it meant that maybe something would happen where we could continue. Because without permission, we can't do this. We can't just run out into somewhere and do this and run away. This requires the Polynesian people to cooperate with us, to do the ceremony with us. We can't do it, and they can't do it. They need the entire world to be there with them, and that's who we were representing. And so he asked for a meeting, and it was in the afternoon, and and I again brought Ruth with me because I knew she could speak the Polynesian language, and she understood their ways and everything else. And so we drove to the address they told us, which was it was his house, and we went into the backyard, and in the backyard there was Papa Mataru in an old white plastic chair in the sand, and his family standing all around him, his wife, his children, and their children, his grandchildren. They were all sitting around there waiting for us to show up. And they had 2 chairs sitting there for Ruth and I. So we came in, and with great reverence we bowed to them and to give him honor for who he was. And he asked us to sit in the chairs. And so we started to introduce ourselves and everything. And while we were doing that, I noticed that he was squinting like this and trying to see who we were. And I realized that he can't see very well. He also couldn't walk very well because you could see his legs were swollen, and he had a cane beside his chair that he needed to be able to walk with. And so he stopped for a moment, and he said, "Come closer. I have to be able to see you." So I was about 12 feet away from him. And so I moved my chair about half the distance, and I sat down and looked at him. And he still was squinting and squinting. He says, "No, you have to come a lot closer. I can't see you." And so I did. I moved the chair till I was about that far away from his face. And I looked, and he says, "Can you see now?" And he says, "Yes, I can see." And then he goes really quiet, and he says nothing. And so I just sat there waiting for him to make the next move. And he looked at me, and he looked at me, and maybe 2 or 3 minutes went by. And then suddenly his whole face opened up, and a smile went on his face. And this is a quote. He said, "Oh, I remember you. You're from the stars." And he points to the heavens. He says, "I have been waiting to meet you all my life." He says, "Anything you want, you can have it, whatever it is." And immediately, to not lose the momentum, I said, "Well, we would like to go into the middle of the island to do a world ceremony there." And he says, "Absolutely, you can go into the middle of the island. I'll arrange everything." He says, "I'm an old man, and I can't walk very well, and I can't walk into the middle of the island, and I really want to be in this ceremony. I feel like I need to be there." He says, "Would you do it here?" Well, there's something I didn't say. The night before, I had a dream. And I had a dream that if you can imagine the grid around the Earth, and that it has a toroidal field, like a magnetic field that goes around it, just like it does to the Earth, and it comes around and it goes in. It comes out of the South Pole and it goes into the North Pole. And so it comes out of Maria and it goes into Egypt. And if you think of that, it's like a big tube. It's a vortex, and it's hollow. And I was wanting to be in the center of the island, but what was made clear in this dream, it didn't matter where you were on the island, because the tube that we were needed to be within was bigger than the island. And so